Hey guys, welcome to Facts Tell. I'm Sina.
I'm Pablo.
So in today's episode, let's talk about China threat narrative.
Remember to click like and subscribe if you like our show.
Recently, an annual report of worldwide threat to the national security of the United States has been released. It talks about all kinds of threats, but the first chapter and almost 6 pages are all about China.
6 pages?
Yeah.
Wow, that's really long. So what have we done that they have to write 6 pages? But the thing is, the China threat narrative is not something new. As a matter of fact, it lasts for many, many years.
That's right. It can date back to the 19th century gold rush in America. So it has over 100 years of history. Let's start from the very beginning in this episode. I think it's scarcely believed now that in 1849, just about 50 Chinese, they lived in California.
50.
Yeah. But in 1876, I think more than 110,000 Chinese, they were working in the state, having been enticed by the so-called gold rush.
Well, I'm sure many people are familiar with the gold rush, right? Yeah. But there's something that most people do not know.
I think the thing people don't understand is why there are so many migrating Chinese suddenly appeared in the U.S.
Right?
What is reason? How do they know? Suddenly there is gold that has been discovered in California. So that's because the master of vessels back then, they helped to spread information in Chinese ports, right? Just like via all kinds of pamphlets, right? Those colorful pamphlets depicting that, oh, there are gold hills of California they have been found out. So those vessels, they transported thousands of Chinese to the U.S. West Coast where they made a lot of money.
But their presence, a lot of people, they created a potential risk for cultural friction. And it really did happen.
Yeah, it did happen. So I think when gold became hard to find, white people there, they became like less tolerant of the Chinese.
Yes. And anti-Chinese sentiments, they emerged and immigrant laborers were forcibly removed from the mining fields.
And when the gold rush ended, Chinese Americans were considered cheap labor because they work hard, right? As all Chinese do, they work hard and they accepted reasonable wages. So they can find employment as farmhands, gardeners, domestics, laundry workers, and most famously, railroad workers.
Oh, yes. I think that a lot of people, they work as railroad workers back then.
Yeah, that's right.
Right.
Yeah, so it seems that they were needed, right, by the early California civilization.
I think they component like a major part of the civilization that formed the California and even the U.S.
Yeah, that's right, especially West Coast.
But then things started to get worse.
Yeah.
By the 1870s, a widespread economic depression had hit America, and jobs become scarce.
Yeah, I think that's what is scary about the situation, because due to the decline of the post-Civil War economy, bigotry against Chinese labor soared, and the labor leader like Dennis Kearney, and his Working Men's Party, along with California Governor John Bigler, they blamed the Chinese for depressing wages, and that really, I think, fueled the anti-Chinese legislation.
It's really interesting. They started to blame the Chinese.
Yeah, suddenly.
So you can see that the U.S. politicians, they started 100 years ago to blame their problems on something or somebody else. In this case, it was a racial or a national group.
Yeah, it's like, so that's not something new, because nowadays they have become even more dexterous at this kind of thing. They diverting people's attention to an external enemy so that, people pay less attention to domestic issues.
Yeah, of course. So why don't we talk about the Chinese Exclusion Act? I think it's very interesting to talk about here.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So I think back then, one of the federal laws, the Chinese Exclusion Act signed by President Chester Arthur in 1882, it prohibited the immigration of Chinese laborers for 10 years, and its provision extended to merchants, teachers, students, tourists, and even diplomats.
Well, I literally do not understand why they banned diplomats,
I mean, they banned everybody. As long as you're Chinese, you're banned.
Yeah.
That's what happened then. Yeah. So I think this law, it's really cruel, right? The Chinese Exclusion Act, I think it was the first and only major U.S. law ever implemented to prevent all members of a specific nation group from immigration into the United States.
So as we said previously, the early immigration ban was preceded by the growing anti-Chinese sentiment, anti-Chinese violence, right? So even then, in the 19th century California, in the United States, the life of a Chinese immigrant had become rather difficult because they have to face a lot of restrictions, bans, challenges in their life.
Even violence.
Yeah.
Well, it was horrendous, absolutely horrendous. You see the first violence against the Chinese happening in the goldfields of California in the 1850s. You see officials, law enforcement, white law enforcement officials turning a blind eye to it. For a very long time, Chinese could not testify against whites in court, which just meant open season on Chinese immigrants, because if you had 2 Chinese witnesses to a murder, then you had no court case if you didn't have any white witnesses. And so the violence was extreme against them. Their arson was incredible. Many Chinatowns were burned to the ground.
In the book American Exodus, Second Generation Chinese Americans in China, 1901 to 1949, Professor Brooks illustrates what the situation was like for descendants of Chinese, right, in the U.S., and why almost half of the Chinese Americans born in the U.S., they moved back to China at the time.
They moved back to China.
Yeah.
But above all, these essay writers were young people who, because of their race and ancestry, had almost no chance of experiencing the same treatment as their white peers, even in the best of times in pre-war America, meaning no chance to live in the same kinds of neighborhoods, work in jobs equal to their educations, or enjoy almost any social or economic mobility because of the racism they encountered everywhere. And of course, these young people had the grave misfortune of coming of age in the midst of the Great Depression, which simply compounded the effects of the racism they already faced.
So they fled racism, right? You know what's extraordinary is that was at a time when people from around the world flocked to the U.S. But these Chinese Americans, they realized how much racism, unfairness, and discrimination American could bring him, so they left.
Right.
Yeah.
And let's fast forward to today during our COVID period, you know? Because it's like a major period of the world. The experience is also the same. The US government claimed the origin of the disease was man-made rather than natural.
Yeah.
As many renowned experts, they reckon the hate crimes against Asian groups skyrocketed.
Yeah.
You know, I have read many news on the website about many Asian people, they were attacked in the US for no good reason. You know, some of them are even like brutal, and some of when you see this video, you're angry all the time.
Yeah, I'm angry, and I think I'm terrified because I'm an Asian as well. And you know what? You're right, Pablo. According to a report released by Stop AAPI Hate, a national coalition tracking hate crimes, more than 11,000 hate incidents against Asian Americans were reported across U.S. between March 2020 and March 2022.
That's a large number.
Yeah, right? So I think just like what you mentioned, when you read this kind of article or when you watch this kind of video, I think personally I feel terrified and so angry. Yeah.
You know, as an Asian, you know, it's getting more and more dangerous if you live in America, because you might get attacked for no good reason when you walk on the streets and you're doing absolutely nothing, right?
Yeah, like we are absolutely innocent people, okay? So if you first come to the show, we are Facts Tell, and in this episode, we're talking about China threat narrative. So if you're interested, leave a comment down below and also click like and subscribe. Let's move on. All right, so the mid-20th century also saw a boom in the China threat narrative. What people called it back then was Red China. The U.S. once feared that the victory of the Chinese Revolution might trigger a domino effect in Southeast Asia, thus forming a red threat to America. So that's why, you know, they put forward this Red China theory.
Yes, and during this period, the theory of the China threat also appeared in the context of the Cold War between the United States and Soviet Union.
You know what thing I'm interested in is just this Cold War mindset. It hasn't gone away. You know, it is reflected.
It's always there.
It's always there. It never gone. It's reflected in today's politics in America because in many eyes, China has replaced the Soviet Union to become the biggest threat, right? So the reason the U.S. is unable to dump the Cold War mindset is that it's influenced so deeply and it's influenced so much by its hegemonic instincts and insecurity over the possible awakening of its, you know, global dominance.
Yes, but however, at the same time, China has always laid out plan peaceful development for
Yeah.
2 decades, I think.
Yeah.
I think we are all familiar with
We
the
grew up with
term
that, yeah.
peaceful development,
That's right. That's what we're always saying.
Yeah, it's repeatedly said that the China's modernization is on the right course of peaceful development.
Yeah, and I think what we really want as Chinese people,
Right.
like as ordinary people like us, or like our country, I think what we really want is really a peaceful international order. We don't want to topple it or like making any trouble, because our development relies on peaceful international order, right? And the other thing is China openly expressed several times that it will never seek hegemony.
Yes. And when the Western media criticize China's rising national defense budget, all we do is protecting ourselves against these potential risks and promoting national security. We didn't, do it for to realize some like giant dreams to come true.
No, we're never
just
aggressive. No,
self-protective.
that's right. For self-protection, there's something that I want to show you. It's a comic. So have a look. I mean, look at this one. I mean, just like
Is that plane?
I think it's missiles.
Oh, missiles.
Yeah.
Oh.
So like, just like this comic depicts, we are surrounded by a dozen U.S. military bases, right? There's so many military bases. They are in Asia, in Southeast Asia. They are around China. So what are we gonna do, right? We're gonna protect ourselves, right? Otherwise, it's just too dangerous for us to sitting around. But look at in this comic, what the U.S. do is the U.S. is calling us the threat.
I just feel really scared. Even just looking at this picture, because I'm not even in this picture, but if there were so many missiles pointed at me, I feel so scared.
That's right. Like even that's a comic, but still it scares us, right?
Right.
We are doing nothing wrong, but we're pointed or we're targeted by all these kinds of military weapons.
Just like these Asian people walking on the streets in the US and attacked it for no reason, right? Right.
Exactly.
So in fact, China has never shown any intention of engaging in any kinds of arm race or like competition with the US military, right? And we don't have any willingness to overwhelm the US military capability that we don't get involved. Yeah.
That's right. We never want to start an arms race. If we want to do one, right? If we want to start one, why should we, sign or accede to, let's say, more than 20 multilateral arms control, disarmament, and non-proliferation treaties, including the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons, the NPT, right? Why should we sign all that? Or if we sign that, we can just withdraw. But we never do that.
Yes, I think when we get to the bottom of this issue, I think the root cause is that the Western world, they do not really understand China at all.
No.
Once some Westerners and Western leaders really know about China, or at least they started to learn, they might change their perception.
Yeah, I
But
think they could, yeah.
unfortunately, most of the leaders, they refuse to learn.
Yeah, well, in this case, I have an interesting study I want to show you. So there's an interesting study, right, on how U.S. Presidents Obama, Trump, and Biden showed the highest intensity of threat perception of China at the beginning of their terms. But then the intensity over the years dropped. One reason is that they entered office with a multitude of perceived notions of China, and the uncertainty and unknown, they can create this, let's say, more intense threat perception. But as they became more comfortable in the White House and gained firsthand experience in dealing with China and its leaders, the threat perception mellowed out.
Yes, certainly. I think that, communication and understanding can effectively and dramatically reduce their threat perception towards China.
Definitely.
Right?
Yeah.
He set out his plans for fixing the economy and also warned of the threat posed by the rising power of China.
China is the only country, they say, that wants to fundamentally reshape the international order and has the diplomatic, military, technology aspects to do that, that potential to try to change and reshape that international order.
Regrettably, we found that China, they do not want me or us to win because I am the first president ever to challenge China on trade.
Did you see that Wang rolled his eyes
Yeah, and he also shrugged his shoulder.
Yes, I think I really feel for him when I watched the video. If I were there, I would do the same thing.
You gonna roll your eyes?
I would be like, oh my goodness, what is the man talking about?
Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense, right?
Definitely. So I think people need to really, this is what we're talking about. You need to be an empty cup. right? When you come to learn something,
Exactly.
when you come to learn a new culture, when you come to learn a new skill or a new language, you can't just, walk with all your perceived notions of something. Then you can never learn. You can never, find something new and something interesting.
Right, exactly.
So, yeah, this is what they need, indeed. So if you're first coming to the show, we are Facts Tell. Please leave a comments down below. And we are talking about, in this episode, China threat narrative. If you like our show, please remember to click like and click like and subscribe as well.
So let's move on to the 21st century because we're talking about the history most of the times. But now, during this period, the 21st century, the U.S. perceptions toward China had gone through many changes. Sometimes it's good, sometimes bad, sometimes it's even worse.
Yeah.
But generally speaking, the U.S.'s negative perception toward China has risen dramatically.
Yeah, that's right. I think there's a turning point, really, is 2017, right?
2017, I think it's when the economic and trade conflict really came out.
Yeah, that's right, the tensions. So since 2017, the economic and trade tensions between China and the United States have deeply affected the perception of the public in the United States. And also other issues outside the economic and trade field also attracted wide public attention and heated discussions.
Yes. And after 2018, the Trump administration's China strategy shifted to the tone of great power competition.
Yeah.
They started to call China a major competitor with the U.S., which is like, I don't know, it's like they're afraid of something, right? And pollings, there are a lot of pollings. They show that the American public's negative perception of China has risen significantly because, the U.S. government, they have recognized and regarded China as a major competitor.
Yeah, in their media all the time, everywhere. And I think in 2020, it is after the outbreak of COVID-19, I think it is when the negative perception reached its peak, right? As Sino-U.S. relationship became increasingly competitive. The U.S. public not only accepted that China was a strategic adversary, but also they believed that China posed a threat to the U.S. in terms of security and economic strength.
So basically speaking, China is a threat in terms of every category, right?
Basically, like economy and
Everything.
national security,
we
cyber,
ourselves as a threat.
Yeah, that's right.
But first, let's go back to the January 2018. In the January of 2018, the U.S. government, the U.S. Department of Defense, they released a report called the National Defense Strategy Report. And they clearly states that the strategic competition had become the guiding ideology of the U.S. policy towards China. Let's take a look at the sentence here. It says that China is a strategic competitor. Those are very strong words.
Those are really,
right?
and what it says is using predatory economics to intimidate neighbors while militarizing features in South China Sea. It's just like,
They say we are intimidate countries.
And we, predatory economic strategies. Yeah.
Yes, and also it says that China is leveraging military modernization, influence operations, and predatory economics to coerce the neighboring countries. I think those are very strong words.
Yeah, and
right?
you know what? I think it's first put forward by Alexander George, the coercive diplomacy. That's for American diplomacy, right? They used coercive diplomacy, but they are now accusing us of using that.
They can use the term everywhere.
Yeah, but they're the expert. Right?
Yeah.
They started it, and they blame us. They're blaming someone else. You are using it. In fact, we're not, but they just accusing us of using it.
Yes. So the fact is that the China's superior economic growth, right? It's a truth. They have made it difficult for the U.S. to adapt because the U.S. has always been recognized itself as a leader of the world. They dominate the world in almost every category. And now there is a country called China is rising. They become stronger and stronger. They feel intimidated.
That's right.
Yeah.
So I think what is even more difficult for the American public to accept is being overtaken by other countries, just like what you mentioned. And they believe that, anyone catching up is a threat. So it's not just about China. It could be any other country.
Any country.
It could be Japan. It could be Spain, right?
Yeah.
It could be Sweden. It's just like any other country. If you become the number 2, then you are a threat and you are targeted.
Yeah. So in March 2018, the Trump administration, they took American first The slogan was very familiar, as a foundation of its foreign policy.
Yeah.
And they set off a wave of hostility towards China in economics, trade, technology, security, and they sent the bilateral relationships to a downward spiral. And they basically think that China is a competitor in every category of major category.
Yeah.
Right? When it comes to, country competitions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think American first is really clear, and I think it's really straightforward to saying that America is the most important factor or the important, let's say, a reason when it comes to deal with, relationship with other countries. America has to be first, and you have to be second.
Yes.
No matter what, we are the most important one. That's, I think, what Trump means, and it's very frank, very clearly.
Yes.
Yeah.
But there is a fun fact I'd like to point out. Because at the same time,
Mm-hmm.
the American public still has a favorable attitude
Right.
toward China. And they affirm China's international relations. And,
Mm-hmm.
they think that China is still a great country.
Yeah.
They recognize China, they praise China, right?
Yeah.
So let's take a look at some numbers on the global views of China. This is a survey done by the Pew Research Center.
Yeah.
It says that across the 25 countries polled, nearly half of the country, they hold a favorable view of China. And the countries from the Africa, the Middle East, and the parts of Asia, they gave positive marks to China.
Yeah, I think that's really extraordinary. And also, like, in the same report across 25 countries, right? I think the median is 70%. So the majority of the country, like a global median of 70%, they say China plays a more important role in the world than it did 10 years ago. So that's quite extraordinary. So even the media, even the Western mainstream media, they're using this all kinds of anti-China narrative or this China threat theory. But still, like the public, the ordinary people, they're still having this, that's even positive, right? And objective opinion towards China.
At that time, even though the US government, they have presented a lot of anti-China narratives
Yeah.
and actions and measures, to smear China,
Yeah.
but the US public, they still hold a favorable attitude, which means that they have their own opinion.
That's right. They're not they're not willing to let, or like, let's say, misled, right?
Yes.
By the mainstream media.
So here is a little bit background here. While the overall income of developed countries like the US, like the UK, they have increased, the labor-intensive industrial chain has been transferred into developing countries.
Yeah.
Because they have lower labor
costs, yeah.
Yes. But the change has brought about problems such as they have fewer jobs on the industry and they lost their job opportunities in the US.
Yeah, I think these problems really accelerated exposure of the hollowing out of the manufacturing industry and the huge wealth gap in the US. And meanwhile, I think Donald Trump's support for American First, right, just like what you mentioned, he's promised return jobs, and his opposition to migrant labor won the support of so many voters.
Yes, they have won so many votes
Yeah.
from this category
That's right.
because they promised
Yeah.
these things, right?
Yeah. So, because I think the main reason why it can win votes is because these people, they firmly believe that China has robbed them of job, right?
Yes.
Yeah, they think the Chinese are stealing their jobs, and they see tariffs as a solution to the problem. But the truth is, tariff is really bad. And look at the inflation right now, and with the high tariff and the inflation, the cost of living for ordinary Americans is just skyrocketed.
Yes, yes. And this
The United States lost over 3 million manufacturing jobs, nearly a quarter of all steel jobs, and 60,000 factories after China joined the WTO.
This is really funny, right? I think just like what he
pretty
said.
funny.
Yeah. So he simplified the problems of industrial hollowing out and uneven distribution brought out by globalization into hatred toward China. But the thing is, no one is pointing a gun at American entrepreneurs to open factories in China. They did voluntarily, right? Because of the cheap labor, because of the lower cost, they moved their factories into Southeast Asia. And their factories in Vietnam, right? In, let's say, Indonesia as well. Why not just China? So,
they're just like deliberately targeting at China, blame China for everything
Exactly.
that's happening in the U.S.
Yeah.
It looks like the China is manipulating the country.
Yeah,
Right.
China is always the scapegoat. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's move to the 2020. You know, in 2020, the COVID-19 pandemic spread globally, right?
yeah.
But the U.S. government downplayed the domestic COVID-19 prevention and control work. As we can see, a lot of data from the website, you know, it's really easy to find out that the number of fatality cases of the COVID-19 in the U.S. has skyrocketed since 2020, right? And the U.S. is becoming the most death of COVID-19 in the world right now.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah. But the thing is, what they did is they didn't, try to kill more people. At that time, they didn't try to, let's say, reduce the death toll. Instead, then U.S. President Trump, his Vice President Mike Pence, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, and Senator Marco Rubio, they formed the anti-China vanguard.
Vanguard.
Yeah,
Okay,
so-
that's a funny word.
Yeah, they constantly spreading false rumors in the media.
Yes. Let's take a look at some of the Trump's tweets commenting on the COVID,
Mm-hmm.
because he said something really aggressive
Uh-huh.
and unacceptable, like this one. In this tweet, Trump said the COVID-19 as the China virus.
Yeah.
And he repeatedly said the COVID-19 as the China virus multiple times
Mm-hmm.
in many occasions, right? As we can see that many people, they have shown the interest that how Trump tweets about the COVID-19
Yeah.
at that time.
Yeah, but this is wrong. Like, this is unacceptable. Apart from
Not
the,
like use a country to name a virus,
you
right?
can't. You can't. Yeah, it just as the WHO pointed out that there's no correlation between a country and a virus, and also it's a globalized world, right? Because the globalization, people can travel around, and also for this virus, so many experts have said that it's natural cause. So when he deliberately to name the virus with a country, this is politicization.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. And another example is Mike Pence. During his vice presidential debate with Kamala Harris, he said at the debate, that China is to blame for the coronavirus, and the President Trump is not happy about it.
Yeah.
He just directly accused China of causing this outbreak of the coronavirus,
Yeah.
which is really offensive.
Yeah, so that's what
yeah.
this vanguard, this four-man group did over and over again and again on the media to blaming China. And besides their COVID-19 accusations, they also spread rumors regarding China's so-called human rights violations, right?
Right. And in January 2021, Pompeo, he announced that the United States Department of State, they have determined that the genocide and
Yeah.
crimes against humanity had been perpetrated by China against the Uyghurs.
That's right.
He said China had committed genocide and crimes against humanity, and predominantly Muslim Uyghurs and other ethnic and religious minority groups.
Yeah, you know what's funny about this is they never have any sort of real evidence. They always use fake evidence and fake data. The one thing they're using, what's funny about that is they're using the Xinjiang victim database. And the Xinjiang victim database, they released a report on Xinjiang police. And you know what I found on the list of the Xinjiang police? Celebrities from Hong Kong.
Celebrities from Hong Kong?
Yeah, like Chok Kun-fa and Liu Doufa. So so movie stars, they can make billions of dollars, I think, every year. Movie stars from Hong Kong, they put their name and onto the list of Xinjiang police list. It's issued by the database they used to accuse that we have this so-called genocide in Xinjiang.
Yes. And also in March 2021, the State Department of the U.S., they released a report
Yeah.
and claiming that the so-called genocide and crimes against humanity have occurred in Xinjiang.
Yeah.
But they didn't provide any real concrete evidence about it. They just gave us names and accusations
That's right.
when they feel like it,
Yeah.
right?
So I think the clash of ideologies between China and the United States has widened. What it has done, what it has done is it profoundly affects the general public's understanding of China.
Yes. I think because of the serious political division in the US,
Yeah.
because of the two parties,
Yeah.
their conflict between each other,
Yeah.
the hostility from the public in the US towards China has risen.
Mm-hmm.
And some people I mean like public, ordinary people,
Yeah.
they see China's national development model and political system is incompatible with the United States. And they believe that the China violates some basic political principles like freedom, democracy, and human rights.
Yeah, but just like I said, all these, let's say, principles or whatever, they're advocated by the U.S., right? They are made up, man-made by the U.S. It's just not something that we actually did. It's something they say we actually did,
Yes.
was all that kind of accusation. So here I'd like to provide some reference about how, we want to talk about how genocide is identified. I think that's quite interesting to talk about as well.
Yes, because, the term genocide, if you want to identify some countries to commit genocide, you have to give real evidence, right?
Yeah,
and in December 1948, the UN General Assembly, they adopted a paperwork. They clearly defines the crime of genocide. According to this convention, genocide means that any atrocity committed with intent to destroy in whole or in part a national or ethnic or racial or religious group.
Yeah.
It means that you have to destroy a whole or in part.
Yeah, that's right. So in objectivity or in reality, it must be proven, right, that the perpetrator committed the relevant acts specified in the convention. So I think what is most basic requirement is to finding the crime of genocide, is to finding those evidence. And the determination of genocide needs to go through authoritative and strict legal procedures and stand the test of facts and history, right?
So did the U.S. they have gone through all these tests?
They
facts, and
never,
history?
right? The thing is, they never. And just like what we said about those evidence they're using, it's just like all fabricated, even hallucinated. So that's why it's just, so politicized about this issue.
So they couldn't provide any evidence. They couldn't, provide concrete, measures to solve this problem. They just gave us a name.
What they did,
Toss a
right?
name at our head.
I think
right?
what they did is using fake evidence. That's what they did, right? They created fake things to point a finger at us.
So here I'd like to quote a word from an official in China. She said that no state, organization, or individual has the qualification or right to arbitrarily determine that another state has committed genocide.
Yeah, that's right.
Which means in the international relations, no country should use the crime as a political label for malicious manipulation.
Yeah.
It means that if you want to accuse country of committing genocide, please go through the procedures.
Yeah, please go through the legal procedures and please, according to the certain compliances. That's what they need to do instead of, just pointing fingers at other thing. So, here's Facts Out. If you're new to our show, we are Facts Out and we're talking about China threat narrative in this episode. If you're interested, remember to click like and subscribe and also leave your comment down below. All right, so let's talk about something current, something happened nowadays. So at present, China-U.S. relations are at a crossroads, right? And a new strategic consensus needs to be shaped urgently.
Yes, and at this moment, the relationship between China and the U.S. is really complicated.
It is.
We cannot say that it's bad.
No.
And we cannot say it's really promising, but it's mixed with hope and challenges.
That's right. Yeah.
And false and biased reports in the U.S. media on China's internal affairs, like they always report news like Hong Kong, Xinjiang, Tibet, Taiwan, right?
Yeah.
Especially Taiwan.
All this kind of
they
things.
intensified all this kind of news, and China's so-called threats in its South China Sea and Taiwan have also been deliberately exaggerated by the U.S. media.
Yeah, so I think that's what they shouldn't do right now, because if they really want to improve our relationship, if they really want to solve problems, use some truth, right? Listen to us. Listen to Facts Tell, watch Facts Tell. What they really need.
We give you the fact.
Yeah, we give you they need perspectives, right? They need truth. Instead of they use this fabrication, they use their hallucination to influence people. It's just not, really positive thing to do. And just as a Chinese academic, Zhang Xiaoqing, pointed out, there are actually multiple reasons, behind the U.S. forced perception toward China.
Yes. So let's go to the first reason. The first reason is from the political side.
Yeah.
Because judging from the choices for the Biden administration, following the political support Trump gained from his tough policy because, you know,
Yeah.
Trump administration has established a really tough policy towards China, and he gained many votes and became president of the United States, right?
That's true.
So the Biden administration, they think that the decision-making team, they have to sustain this threat perception index in its approach to China. Maybe the Biden administration think that if they continue to adhere to this kind of
Tough.
perception
Yeah.
towards China, they could get vote
Yeah,
from the public.
I think that's exactly what I want. And the second reason is the U.S. government and society's stigmatization of China has hijacked American public's perception of China. The public is not only a direct beneficiary of friendship between China and the United States, but they are also the victim of the hostility between two countries. I mean, look, if they destroy the U.S.-China relationship, how many companies, how many enterprises they gonna suffer? And
Yeah,
you know, all those
exactly.
people who worked under those companies and enterprises, they either lost their job or they just, you know, their business or their company will be influenced hugely. So I think the remarks on the traceability of COVID-19 directly led to the rise of racial discrimination and also the old kinds of hate crimes against Asians in the United States. And so hate crimes and also the bad relationship between China and the U.S. just gonna influence badly to commerce and also to the people, Chinese, Asian Americans living in the U.S. You know, all kinds of aspects, perspectives will be influenced. So before we talk about another reason, here's a clip I want to show you.
The Chinese state has detained more than 1 million Uyghurs.
Thousands of children believed to have been separated from their parents.
As we can see from the clip, that
Yeah.
all these anti-China narrative, the United States has included all these narratives, part of its value diplomacy,
Everywhere,
you know,
yeah.
and they forced its allies to choose sides between the China and the United States.
Yeah.
Because sometimes when it comes to choosing side between China and the US, the allied countries from the US, like the UK, France, Australia, they have to choose sides. But their choices is not purely objective. Sometimes it could be influenced and affected by other reasons, such as this kind of perceptions.
Yeah, such as the anti-Chinese narrative or the China threat theory. But the thing is, there is no side. There is no sides at all. Why there should be sides, right? Why there always should be, you know, U.S. Soviet Union thing, always should be Cold War, always should be two sides, or always should be two superpower. The thing is, why not we can have a, let's say, a multipolar, a multi-civilizational world? Isn't like, I think the best thing is we can remain different. Well, we can work together.
I think the US is feeling insecure.
Yeah, like a baby.
It's like a baby. It's really,
Yeah.
really insecure. If something or somebody challenges him or it becomes really competitive and, you know, thinks that it could dominate something, he's not happy about it. He's going to do something about it, right?
You know what the U.S. is like? It's like Regina George.
Regina George. How do I even begin explaining Regina George?
It's just like always full of insecurity. You know, when she says a beautiful girl, it's just like when the U.S. sees a rising country, you know, it just feels threats all the time.
Yes.
Yeah, you know, it's just like, it's so hard to understand. Maybe because we're not Regina George. Maybe because we're not a top one country in the world. So that's why we don't have this splendor. We don't have this insecurity all the time.
But we don't have the intention of becoming this kind of dominating country in the world, right?
We're never seeking hegemony. Never.
We love everybody, right? We love everybody.
Yeah.
And also, I have, you know, it reminds me of a story.
Yeah.
That I encountered, you know, like 2 years ago when I
Yeah.
was traveling in Australia.
Yeah.
One of my friends, I asked him, like, what's your first impression of China? And his answer was really surprising. Do you know what his answer is?
No, what
he
is his
said,
answer?
my first impression about China is the economic conflict with US. I was like, what? You know, because if I talk about some, you know, the first impression of a conflict,
Panda.
I'm going to talk about like the Great Wall.
Yeah, War, the Great
and,
War, Summer Palace.
West Lake, right?
Yeah.
I don't talk about economy. I don't talk about conflict with countries.
No.
So it could be it's so obvious that the public are so affected by the media because
Yeah.
the media always give this kind of information to the public, and they have to absorb this kind of news and change their ideology,
That's right. Totally.
which is really horrifying.
Yeah,
Horrifying.
it's
It's like
gonna-
brainwashing.
Yeah,
it's like brainwashing.
it's brainwashing. It's propaganda. It's Western propaganda. That's exactly what they did.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
So at this year's Munich Security Conference, the U.S. exaggerated China's security threat and called on European allies to join hands to deal with challenges from China and Russia, just like what you said. So Biden believed the United States and Europe must unite to counter China's irregular and coercive economic behavior. But I think that's quite funny. Is they're calling us we have this coercive economic behavior, but they are the king of coercive diplomacy, right? They're the star. They're using this coercive diplomacy, like say 50 years ago, 70 years ago, right? On so many countries, on Cuba, on other Latin American countries as well.
Yes. So to summarize, all these fake news, the conspiracy theories, and other erroneous propaganda erode the national authority and international credibility of China.
That's right.
I think the media is to blame because sometimes the media, they just want clickbait. They just want people to read it, to get interested, to click on the website, right? So they don't take any responsibility. They just get the news and they publish it. And if the news is worth reading or the public is interested, they're just going to do it. So all this like fake news, like the so-called genocide against the Uyghur and the Hong Kong related issues, because these things are clickbait.
They are. If
they get people's attention.
They get, If you're writing something about China's development or China's economic growth, nobody gonna read your article, right? But if you're writing, there's a big drop, there's a huge decrease in China's GDP this year, we're gonna find out like what's going on, like what happened. So that's just how they attract people, because they're profit driven. So they kind of, they wanted to make more money instead of, not, like attracting people. So that's what they did.
Yes, I think at this moment, especially at a crossroad, like you said, right? The China-U.S. relations are at a crossroads.
Yeah.
We have to do more to guide the public on the right track instead of, leading them on the wrong direction that we are evils, we do horrible things.
I think that's the whole point of our show, Facts Tell, right?
Facts Tell.
That's exactly what we're doing. I think there's a saying by Asian Chinese thinkers that I like put forth: harmony without uniformity. So meaning harmony can be without sameness, right? And differences can be without conflict. I think this is a great way to go, great way to build a better world, because indeed, people are different, but it's okay. People are different. We have different culture. We have different civilization. We speak different language, but we can work together. We can solve issues. We can solve all those issues like terrorism, nuclear, environmental protection, because none of these problems can be solved by one single country. And all of those problems need to be solved by international efforts.
Yes. You and I, totally different, but we can still be friends. Good friends, right? We don't need to, do a little competition, like who's prettier, who's more handsome.
Yeah,
that's pointless. I don't want to compete you with this.
You're
I
prettier.
just want to be friends.
You're prettier, and we are not.
Prettier, obviously.
Yes, you know what? We are not Regina George, and we never want to be. It's too tired to be her.
Yes. And that's all for our today's Facts Tell. If you have any comment or take on the China-U.S. relations, please give us a comment.
And also, if you like our show, please remember to click like and subscribe, and also leave your comments down below. I'm Sina.
I'm Pablo.
And I will see you guys next time.